Thank you, Dato. Just to give you some sense, Standard Chartered, for example, has been in this country for more than 100 years, 130 years to be exact. But let's listen to what an outsider has to say, and let's talk to the consultant. So the question is, do you think, is this a question of reality, or is this just a perception that the financial institutions in this country are not prepared, particularly the commercial banks?
Well, firstly, good afternoon. I am really excited to be here. I thank the organizers for inviting me. I sense the energy in the room, and I think working with young people is a passion of mine. In Accenture, we've got what I would call a talent-producing factory. We take young graduates and then we shape them up to become leaders and experts in their own right. So very happy to be here, and I hope this session will be beneficial to you all. I think this question about whether Malaysian banks, Malaysian insurance companies, Malaysian stockbroking companies, whether they are ready to face the potential onslaught of foreign competition, I think this question has been asked for well over 15, 20 years. And I think it's a bit of a misnomer, really, because I believe that the liberalization effort to bring in foreign participants in the financial services industry into Malaysia is, on the balance of things, very good for the country for one very simple reason. It brings more attention of the financial services players into this part of the world. It creates an ecosystem where local banks, local insurance companies, and stockbroking companies can collaborate with, can learn from, and play, dance with foreign players. And on the other hand, we have foreign players then who can have their representatives actually living and breathing in Kuala Lumpur. And it's interesting because when you talk to many of the foreign bankers, many of them say, oh, you want me to relocate to Southeast Asia? I need to go to Singapore. Right? That's the first reaction that they have. It's also very interesting when you talk to some of them who spent about 3 or 4 years in the region and they've spent time in KL. They actually say KL it's a much more interesting, it's a nicer place to be, and I would like to spend some years of my career here in KL. And I get very enthused when I hear that, because bringing expatriates in with certain specialized knowledge, for example, in setting up credit factories, in setting up processing hubs, bringing in talented investment bankers that have got a slightly different perspective on products, on distribution, and on the psyche of European buyers and American buyers. I believe that there can be nothing bad in that, because the cross-pollination and the collaboration that could potentially come from the sharing of those ideas would be wonderful for our local banks. Right, so I think when we talk about the threat of potential foreign competition in Malaysia, I absolutely think it's a misnomer. I agree with Datuk Sharon that many of our local banks have got a lot to shout about. We've got world-class internet banking capabilities. We have world-class credit cards, and I can tell you that when you go to the UK or to the US, you will not be able to find credit card functions and benefits that are better. Right? Maybe the distribution is a tad better. So I think we have a lot to shout about, but at the same time, we cannot be complacent and think that Malaysia's financial services sector can exist in a bit of a semi-vacuum, right? That we can be jago kampung, we are great in Malaysia, without having a much broader perspective on the fact that the financial services industry is probably the most global industry in the world. Capital can move in instants, right? From London to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong to Shanghai, Beijing, and we need to be making efforts to get into the nexus of that flow. If we don't, we are left out. And one of the ways of doing that is to so-called liberalize and bring in the attention, bring in the players, get them to understand Malaysia, to appreciate our story, get them to see what we have to offer, and make even greater commitments from the standpoint of setting up representative offices or even their branches here in Malaysia. But I think it is a difficult balancing act. There was a specific question from Nani, why why was the shareholding cap of 30% not raised for the commercial banks? I actually happen to agree with that. I think that we should tread very carefully about liberalizing the amount of share ownership that foreigners can have of our banks. For a very simple reason. I think Malaysians, our psyche is a bit more conservative. I am actually shocked and horrified by the developments of the financial crisis over the last 18, 20 months. And I think Bank Negara, as the steward of our financial system, has done a stellar job in protecting us from jumping on the bandwagon of complex derivative products. And when you talk to many foreign bankers, back in 2007, they say that the only way to raise EPS by 30, 40% is to get into that game. Right? And I know of a story of a foreign banker coming to a chief executive in Malaysia and making a presentation about why he should actually bet half his farm, so-called half his farm, on complex derivative products. And you know what the chief executives told him? He said, I don't understand this product, therefore I will not get into that. And I think that kind of attitude that we have as financial stewards of the FS industries in Malaysia is what kept us from being crippled from that industry. So I think being very careful of the way we allow foreign share ownership of companies, or especially financial services companies here in Malaysia, is important. But that should not detract us from the desire to see more foreign players coming in, setting up shop, allowing the people to come to Malaysia to bet their career in Malaysia, spend 3 or 4 years in Malaysia, and then go back to their home countries and tell them, Malaysia has a story. Malaysia is in the heart of Southeast Asia. If you take a look at the topological maps of Southeast Asia, you'll find that there is no part of Southeast Asia that we are not in. I am personally very, very impressed by CIMB's aim to become a regional player. I know that there are a couple of other Malaysian-owned banks that have got ambition, and I absolutely think that we need to be thinking regionally. So whilst we try and get more cross-pollination, more cross-fertilization, and more participation from foreign banks and insurance companies and stockbroking companies into Malaysia, we need to be able to start developing our tentacles out into the rest of Southeast Asia, which is our natural hinterland, get the kind of thinking that we have here propagated into these countries and begin to build regional players.